I welcome you to today's class. My name is Mr. Azuka. We'll be considering production, newspaper production, newspaper production. Newspaper concerning the history and the general overview. Talking about we're talking about newspaper production. Copy editing and face planning. Actual newspaper production, depending on the time that we have. So under newspaper production, let's look at how it's all started. So before dive into the 19 creative process of newspaper production, it is German to refresh your mind on the rudiments of newspaper medium. So this is considered necessary given that you will appreciate the newspaper business. So look at newspaper in view. Newspaper in view. Newspaper simply is printed on bonded paper that contain news about current political, economics, social, cultural, educational, environmental, scientific, technology, and sundry affairs, as well as other relevant sales information. So a typical newspaper should therefore contain a blend of editorial content, such as news, features, news commentaries, articles, letter to the editors, material includes the advertisements, supplements, and other paid commercial content, or pictorial in terms of pictures, illustration that complement the news content. So a typical newspaper is characterized as follows. Like most publications that are bounded, newspaper are hardly bounded. Like every other print media mode, newspaper content are usually permanent to the extent one can enjoy repeat exposure for as long as one is able to preserve a particular edition of the newspaper. So it covers broad spectrum of interests, ranging from political to politics, economic, social, environmental, science, technology, and sundry subjects. It is offered periodically, which could be daily, weekly, or bi-weekly. All in all, a newspaper should contain news on current issues of public importance. It is an essential medium of mass communication, which is found in almost all the nations and regions of the world. So you look at the history, it is stated there as you read through. As you read through, you will see it, how newspaper started, 19th, in 18th, how it all started. So this is the historical preview, how it provides strong basic of economic support for the newspaper. You can see how newspaper is. So newspaper has long come way to be where it is today. It has indeed undergone series of evolutions, evolving, evolving from tablets to the page, news sheet, and what we now call modern newspaper. So the same way the production process involves, to the extent have been diversified over time to accommodate different audience members, varying needs and interests. Students therefore need to understand this historical evolution as it is. So we have read through we have read through uh, we have read through it and discover how historically how it went. So and yeah, let's look at the Nigeria history, how it was started. I can read through how it started since 1978, how the history of newspaper in Nigeria started. So you can read through down to March 8, 1860. So you can read through, I can see it. If you can screenshot it, just screenshot it. So you can see how newspaper started. We are trying to give you the history of newspaper, both how it started in abroad and in Nigeria. So the newspaper business began in Nigeria in 1886 with a religious publication by a British missionary. Since then, the industry has grown to the extent many national, regional, and local newspapers circulate regularly in the country. Today, Nigerian newspapers are not only read in office, homes, and sheets, but also online. Again, quality of printing has improved tremendously to the extent digital printing seems to be the order of the day in Nigerian newspaper production. So you can see how history have started in Nigeria. So it traced the newspaper produced to Nigeria in the Owen Ilore. So you see how it goes and how newspaper production started. So look at the classifications of newspaper. So classification by periodicity, how it is being classified. So one of the commonest form of classification to classify newspaper is by periodicity. So this has to do with the frequency with which a particular newspaper title is published. So in Nigeria, like elsewhere, not all newspaper hit the news standard, the newsstand at the same frequency. While some hit newsstand on daily basis, some come out on weekly basis, while others appear fortnightly. So you can look at also example of daily newspaper in Nigeria are Champions, Guardian, Vanguard, This Day, Punch, The Nation, etc. Weekly newspaper exist in Nigeria and examples includes Business World, Insights, Newspage, Oracles, Announce, Express, and a host of them. Now we have classification of by reach. This is another classical way of categorically or categorizing newspaper. In this content, the emphasis is on geological areas or scope of circulations of a given newspaper. Thus, a newspaper can be classified as international newspaper, meaning by meaning that the newspaper circulates across national boundaries, across national boundaries, across national boundaries, apart from apart from fact that Nigeria history are read online. Most Nigerian newspapers do not circulate at international level. So national. Hello. Hello. Just shift small. I'm having class here. Nigerian newspaper meaning that a given newspaper can be read in most parts of the country. This means that national newspaper circulate nationally in the sense that such newspaper can be seen in most parts of the country. Example of such newspaper in Nigeria are the Guardians and newspaper. This Day Punch, the Sun, Nation, and many others. Regional newspaper, which are classified as such because their reach is usually limited to a given region with the collapse of the scopes of the old regional structure in Nigeria. Know that when we have now, remember what we have now is geological zone, which are smaller in scope and area compared to the former regions. So what we have right now is geological zones, no more in regional. So we have the state and local newspaper also bound in greater proportion in Nigeria. So state and local newspaper also abound in greater proportion in Nigeria. So this classification is usually based on the fact that they are produced for circulation within a state or locality within a state. So Typical example of this kind of exams in Nigeria include both not limited to Chronicles, Hard Truths, Kogi, Graphics, Urbana Voice, National Light, Statesman, Telegraph, and Arise Express. So we also have classification by ownership. Classification by ownership. Classification can also be classified on the basis of ownership structure. On the basis of ownership what? Structure. So in this case of newspaper can be any of the following. One is a government-owned newspaper, which refer to a newspaper that's owned and controlled by either the national or state government. In Nigeria today, state governments usually have state-owned and controlled newspaper like Statesman, owned by Imo State government. The Tide, owned by Rivers government, Rivers State government. The Chronicle by Cross River State. So apart from this East-wide Daily Times, which was established by the national government, there is no federal government-owned newspaper in circulation currently. We have the private-owned newspaper, which is usually established and controlled by private investors. This pattern of newspaper ownership is common in Nigeria. In fact, most of the national newspaper currently in circulation in the country can fall under this form of ownership. We have the mixed ownership describe a pattern of ownership in which public and private investors partner to establish the newspaper. In this case, the government owns certain percentage of the share and private investors own comes. So this is not really common in Nigeria. This only time effort was made in this direction in Nigeria was when the federal government experimented with the Daily Times and experienced that this not last. Now, under classification can also be done by a nature of dominant newspaper interest. Classification by nature of dominant interest. Now, newspaper are often classified in terms of the interest area they covered. So this interest may be sports, fashion, religion, business, gender. So in Nigeria today, most of special interest publication comes in forms of magazine, which few newspapers follow behind. So example of special appeal come interest newspaper are found largely in the area of business and sports. So some of such publications include the Business Day, Complete Sports, and Kickoff. So what am I trying to say is that a newspaper production needs to emphasize different forms, types. So we have succeeded in discussing that a newspaper discussion needs a different forms, types, and categories into which newspaper should be produced and circulated. So much of these such forms are usually on numbers of factors which we have discussed so far. So you have to understand the different classifications of newspaper which we have done to your own understanding. It was meant to further serve as processors to our discussion, and so far so good. Now look at the advantages of newspaper as a mass medium. Newspaper as a mass medium. So advantage of immediacy, or we talk about live broadcast, which broadcast media over the print, have over the print media. The newspaper business has continued to strive in many parts of the world, including Nigeria that we are. So today, broadcast media even complement use of newspaper for dissemination of information via press review. Ordinarily, it is expected that the newspaper industry should squeeze up in face of all this and for what patronize. What are we trying to say is that we have classifications of let's look at the characteristics of newspaper. Characteristics of newspaper. Number one, a newspaper must be published periodically at regular interval. Periodically at regular interval. Number two, newspaper is interval. So these intervals should not be less than, since we say is at regular intervals, so these intervals should not be less than once a week. So it must be medically reproduced. Medically reproduced. It must be timely. It must be timely. It must offer freedom of access. It must offer freedom of access, freedom access to other readers. That is, it must be available to everyone who can afford the other price. So its content must not be aimed at any select group in the society. So advantages of newspaper. So one of the major snags of newspaper business is that over time, the nation has not seen much rural newspaper that can effectively cater for rural development or developmental need. So this newspaper title, which we are regarded as community newspaper. So compare printed and published in local, which is meant to be served in the rural people themselves, and it should be published in language spoken by what you should understand. So some of these function advantages is, what are those advantages? It provides better interpretation. Provide better interpretation or in-depth development stories that place developmental issues and facts in greater perspectives. Number two, having advantages, place and time of exposure and flexibility, which ensure easy comprehension and retention of media content, ensuring easier storage and retrieval for limitless repeat exposure anytime, any day, and anywhere, serving as variable tools for mass education and mass literacy by motivating and encouraging readiness habits among illiteracy and illiterate in the society. So these are the little advantage or advantages of newspaper as we have stated. So we'll talk about newspaper production. Newspaper production does not start with activity in the press. It does not start from the point editors or sub-editors are working on the manuscript submitted by the field reporters either. The actual production process begins the moment the reporter dive into the field to hunt for news. So it is genuine. It is German, therefore, that in discussing the process of newspaper, students should understand and be exposed how it is being gotten. So we'll talk about the beat. The beat is one of the sources of news. We talk about beat as sources of news. So the starting point of newspaper production is gathering of news. Gathering of what? Gathering of news. So in sense, no production can actually take place without news items and other contents to be produced. Other what? Content to be produced. So in news takes reporter to various areas and institutions where news items are found. So what is news beat? News beats are simply special interests or areas or places where reporters are assigned to for purpose of continuous coverage. So beat in this content, therefore, is an institution, agency, or establishment So special area interests or places where reporters are assigned to for purpose of continuous coverage. So BIT in this content, therefore, is an institution or agency or establishment where a reporter goes to on regular basis to gather information about gatherings, about what is happening in that specific areas or publications in his or her news medium. So that is what Newsbeat is. It is areas where you sort out information. So what does it do? It enhance day-to-day work of news organization by making news readiness available. It boosts the quality and quantity of news carried by news organization. It leads to specialization and also every kind of newspaper that you want. So the major news beat in Nigeria. The major information usually, how do we get it? Police or crime beats, where we can get sources for news through police or crime beats, judiciary or court beats, government house correspondence, legislative parliament beat reporters, science, power or men or mine. Then we have the agriculture, we have the education, sports, recruitment, recreation or license. We have the banking or finance. We have the armed forces paramilitary bits. We have the foreign affairs. So all these are ways you can get information from different sources. So it is important to note that when we have what what we have here does not cover all the areas where a newspaper reporter can gather news. What we have discussed here are major ones. There are other sundry areas which either the revolving reporters or the general interest reporter can cover and report to his or her newspaper editor publication. So let's look at gathering of news. We have discussed it and we can't discuss it without talking about how you can gather news. So gathering the stories is very important and it will come from different sources as we have highlighted. So it is important for you to know that gathering of news is very, very important. And it is the eyewitness of an event or occurrence which an interview is sought. A personality who, by virtue of his position in the society, shared influential opinion on burning national interest. So, an expert in a given field who, by virtue of interest or penetrating superior knowledge, chief executive, victim, to ensure a successful interview, the interviewers should take a number of steps, which includes You must define the purpose of the interview by meeting the interviewer. So we must research on the subject, book an appointment, prepare some questions, ask follow-up questions when necessary, and you must be polite. You must what? You must be polite. So monitor the media is very, very important to monitor the movement on how it can be circulated. So, let's just who is that fool now? Shh, hey. So let's look at editorial aspects of newspaper. In newspaper production, editorial production is very crucial in that this stage lays the foundation for the actual printing and collection. In other words, editorial production is one of the stage newspaper man must treat with seriousness in order to excel in actual production of newspaper. So the models therefore is designed to expose you to the technicalities involved in editorial production, emphasis on copy editing, page planning, and of design of sundry processes associated with editorial production to ensure in-depth editorial models are defined in units. When we talk about the manuscript editing, editing is a job that rewards you for reading well. Yes, it's a big job. And we can't talk about this without talking about copy editing. So copy editing, in the simplest term, is a process of, at, of eliminating whatever the detail of copy from it, reading the quick understanding. So this implies that every story filled in by a field reporter is done to contain some errors. To contain some errors. So copy editing involves activity that includes um, correcting the languages involving on the style of the original copy, checking for and removing all kinds of typing and other errors, ensuring that the copies are in accord with the editorial policy of the organization, writing copy when necessary without changing its message. So a copy is usually edited to expurge errors, which could be any or combination of the following. Number one, grammar to ensure the copy is reproduced in acceptable universal grammatical standard. Number two, wording standard to make them sharper, clearer, and concise. Legal to ensure the copy does not contain anything that will attract avoidable legislation. Space to ensure the storage doesn't get us seriously. Lengthening to the extent of overshooting the available space. So what am I trying to say in essence is that rewriting the story to ensure poorly written, juicy, important story does not get drawn to the waste paper basket. So some of these qualities is that it was mentally alert, patient, and meticulous, continues to endure distress, intelligent and creative, and so on and so forth. So copy or manuscript editing is the major starting point of the actual newspaper production. So you must take note of that. Now look at photo editing. Photographer plays a enormous role in newspaper pages. So apart from adding to the overall aesthetics of a newspaper, it helps to emphasize. Hello?
That cover page.
That's what it's on.
Only is on Instagram, that's where to make no comments.
It's open. So a good photographer must be able to register facts, ideas, and emotion with greater accuracy than human eyes. With greater accuracy than human eyes. So a good photographer from foregoing needs no translation, and it's fixed in his mind more readable than words. So photograph plays such role. It has to be well taken and properly edited. So this unit is therefore designed to offer you an illuminating insight into photo editing as part of editorial production. So in national sense, the word photograph, the word photo means light. The word photo here means light in natural science. So on the other hand, the word graphic means writing. The word graphic means lighting. So thus, it is synergy between two words, that is photography. Strip all the technical lessons within photographing is the process or techniques of producing images that mirror reality, that mirror what? Reality, according to Fred. He says that photography is a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we have to know the value of photograph as it goes on. So it helps correct errors caused by the press photographer, inexperienced and incepted. So those ways oriented editors and sub-editors who don't know how to use pictures to say without to say what words cannot say. Don't know how to tell the news story that only pictures can tell the scriptures. So a picture is considered good if it says it like it is. Two, if it catch the eyes of the reader. Number three, if it convey information more vividly than printed words. More tied back effect on the reader. So it is very important that you consider value of photography and photo writing in your work. That is how I have to say about it. So we have page planning. Page planning. Just imagine a newspaper page in which the content are scattered. So such page can hardly attract readers' attention. Not to talk of providing eye comfort. For reasons, editors usually prepare a caricature of the newspaper before it moves down to what it is today. No. So as we proceed, you must reason for planning the page. So there is a method in the ways newspaper are put together. There are ways in which newspaper are put together to ensure that content do not spill into one another and confuse the unsuspecting newspaper audience. So page design is therefore aimed at achieving three major goals. Number one is to attract the eyes of a potential reader, to sign posts with various items and signal their relative importance. Number three is to give a newspaper recognition, visual character. So the goal of a good layers design includes of the following: introduce the audience to publication. It is the front door to the news and first thing reader sees. So help establish two sense of priorities, simplifies the process of absorbing the news and save more time. So planning the page is very, very important by putting the headlines, news stories, pictures, advertisements. They are all important. So it's in phases, phase one and phase two and phase three. So you must know the phases that is contained. So unit count, copywriting. So page planning includes so as you note in the introduction of the unit, no meaningful page planning can take place without first determining the space available in every newspaper page. To fit a copy or headline into the available space, therefore requires a clear picture of the depth of the copy. Method of copy fitting. Determine the space for a given story or copy can be done in several ways. Now you must consider the size of the type you want to consider, number of words per square in inches, and words per square if leading to point or so. So you must consider all this in your copy filing. So proper determination of appropriate space for fitting headlines and news copy, enhanced page planning in newspaper production. This is because determining whether available space can take a particular headline or copy is very, very important. So you must consider all this or else you'll not get it rightly. Typical and signing has to put into consideration as well. So proof reading, you have to consider it in newspaper typology error and newspaper proof errors have to also put into consideration. So in our next class, we'll continue in chapter 4, where we'll talk about production newspaper in detail. Thank you very much for your time.